The Commonwealth of Independent States. All republics that made up the USSR became independent.
The problem is, Chechnya was never a true republic. It was an autonomous state, but still part of the Russian Republic.
Like how Abkhazia was an autonomous state within the Georgian Republic.
Duh. The same kind of sad story. Russia does not recognize Chechnya as independent. They send troops and the fighting begins. It is said 250,000 Chechens were killed over the 2 wars that followed. 1/4 the entire population. The Chechens were forced to give in, and the war officially ended.
But the rebels kept on fighting.
Insurgents fled into Caucasus Mountains, formed several factions. They waged guerrilla war on Russia ever since. We think Dolzaev is the leader of just such a rebel group.
Sounds like Russia bears some of the blame for radicalizing him and his men.
I love my homeland, but she is not perfect. What nation is? Just remember, this could all be smoke. We cannot even confirm Dolzaev is truly ethnic Chechen.
Say he is, though. What would he be after here in Abkhazia?
Some Chechen militants volunteered to fight for the Abkhaz in their war in the early 90s. But when Russia recognized Abkhazia to keep Georgia in check, they also began funding recovery.
Which the Dolzaev crowd see as a play to gain influence. But wasn't the Chechen recovery funded by Russia?
Duh. And many rebels believe this is why their people gave up on independence. Perhaps this is exactly why Dolzaev is here, to alert the people before it can happen again. But if the Abkhaz people are not interested in fighting, his plan could backfire.
So in a way, it's Russian policy that brought him here. He thinks he's fighting to make these people free.
Whatever his motives, no one elected him and no one gave him a permit for murder. Now that he is allied with Desperado, he is too dangerous to ignore. Raiden, if you ever get lost, use augment mode to check your next objective. By using Raiden,
What was up with that wolf dog UG? Some pretty freaky shit.
Hadn't thought too much about it.
Really? I keep wondering, why give it intelligence if you're not gonna let it think for itself?
Good question.
I mean, I guess it makes sense if it improved combat performance.
Now that you mention it, it didn't fight like your typical UG. It felt more like I was facing off against a cyborg.
Oh. I guess the added smarts make for a tougher opponent after all.
That's not what I mean. It wasn't really tougher than your average UG. More like it was, I don't know, hesitant. It didn't follow through on its attacks either.
Guess that's why it was still just a prototype. But then why put it out on the front lines?
Who knows? Maybe it was the field test. In any case, probably not the result they were hoping for. One thing I don't understand, Kev. Desperado must be violating all kinds of laws here. Why hasn't the international community gotten involved?
Well, from a purely legal standpoint, it's actually not so cut and dry. First, there's the fact that Abkhazia is still not a member of the UN. Only Russia and a few other breakaway states even recognize it as a sovereign nation. In the eyes of most of the international community, Abkhazia is technically still part of Georgia, which would make this an internal Georgian issue.
Guess you can't really call it a coup if the displaced government was never seen as legitimate.
Exactly. And even if everyone agrees it was a coup, it can be tough to tell which regime is more legit. Sometimes you'll see the military topple a dictator and establish a provisionary government, for example. Now, if they confirmed atrocities were taking place, the UN could deploy troops, recognize government or not.
Yeah, but they learned their lesson in Somalia.
Right. Ever since then, they've been a lot more reluctant to get involved in civil wars.
So what about the US and Russia? What's their take on all this?
Well, America was never very friendly with Abkhazia or South Ossetia in the first place. And the Georgian government's a regional ally, so the US really has no cause to intervene. Russia wants the old government back, of course. The regime open to their influence. I doubt they'll opt for any large-scale action. Tensions with Georgia are running high already, but you can bet your ass they won't just sit on the sidelines. Boris has got a lot of connections in the Russian bureaucracy. Ex-military buddies. The Abkhaz are officially our clients, but I'm sure it's Russia that chose us. Maybe footing the bill, too. They can't use their actual special forces, so they call us instead. That's the beauty of PMCs.
We're not bound by the same rules as state-sponsored military.
Other countries would be outraged if the Russians went into places we can go freely. From our side, no state to answer to means we can run things as we see fit. By our own code, no compromises.
Then again, there's no one to say our code is what's right.
True. And opinions on that change from person to person, situation to situation. But you let your moral compass waver at all in this business, and real people pay the price. Money's always a factor, of course, but when it becomes the factor, that's when you got problems. The Montreux document lays out guidelines for what PMCs can and can't do, but there's no way to enforce it. A lot of people see that as the fatal flaw of the entire industry. After all, that's how we end up with rogue outfits like Desperado. Then again, it's also what leaves Maverick free to go after them. The industry has a bad rep, but it isn't good or bad itself. It's up to the morals of those who work in it. All we can do is what we think is right and try to lead by example. Anyway, sorry, you know how I am about this stuff. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Don't apologize. That's exactly why we took this job. Taking Sakumi back is the right thing to do.
Agreed. And now, that's all up to you, buddy.
We always talk about the Montreux document, but why hasn't anyone made it legally binding?
People are trying to, both inside and outside the industry, but it's easier said than done. Even with 17 countries on board, it's still just a set of guidelines. They'd need to negotiate an actual treaty based on that agreement for it to become official. And we both know getting everyone to sign on wouldn't be easy.
Yeah. Every government's for regulating PMCs until it restricts how they can use them themselves.
It gets complicated when you try to put it all in exact legal terms, too. A treaty would need to distinguish a PMC's home nation, the one it's active in, and the one that contracted it. Then you have the industry itself, which isn't exactly thrilled at the prospect of greater regulation. There's just so many different parties involved, and everyone's got their own motivations. So yeah, long story short, we're a long way from getting anything legally binding anytime soon.
Sorry I asked.
Raiden, head for the oil refinery.
You know, I almost felt sorry for the little guy.
What? That UG? Why? Because it couldn't disobey its orders?
Yeah, that, and I don't know, it didn't seem especially interested in fighting you somehow.
But was it really thinking on its own? Maybe it was all just an act. Get me to second-guess myself.
You could be right. It's just, it didn't seem like just another UG to me. Maybe it's because I'm such a dog lover.
That was no cuddly puppy, Courtney. It was a wolf, and a nasty one at that.
No, I know. You're right. I didn't mean to sound critical. Whatever it was, it attacked you. You had no other choice.
Didn't have much freedom myself, did I?
Copy that. Later, then?
Yeah. You know, our last chat got me thinking about all the problems with PMCs.
Oh? You come up with a solution to all our industry's ills, then?
Yeah. Let's just change the acronym.
That's your solution? Just change the name and change the reputation, eh? To what? I know you like private security provider, but that'd be PSP. Private military security? PMS?
Well, the Montreux document uses PMSC, right? Private Military and Security Company. A bit more comprehensive. And a bit more awkward too, I guess. Seems like it never really caught on.
Yeah, we only use PMSC on contracts, or when we're specifically excluding older-style PMCs.
I guess once a name sticks, that's it. Old habits are hard to break.
Right. Besides, I think we're past the point that a name change would do much for the industry's image.
I get your point. Though it did work once before. We don't call them mercenaries anymore, do we?
Raiden, head for the oil...
By the way, Raiden, we're not picking up any EXIF codes here either. They're all unaffiliated.
Makes sense. We're enemies. Desperado's EXIF code won't match ours, and vice versa. How much do you know about how EXIF works?
Not much. Just that it comes up as a positive match for friendlies and unaffiliated for anyone else.
Which could be friendlies or neutrals not broadcasting the same code for some reason. Say a damaged transmitter or signal interference. But 99 times out of 100, yeah, it's an enemy. EXIF is based on the IFF radio system aircraft use. Stands for Expanded Identification Friend or Foe.
Too bad it only actively IDs friends and not enemies. But I guess asking troops to broadcast, "Hey, enemy here, kill me," would be a bit much.
Telling friends and enemies apart was always a problem in the air, but it's gotten tricky on the ground too. Especially in the War on Terror, with all these PMCs and multinational forces mixing together. The US Army experimented with infrared patches to ID allies. They'd show up in night vision.
Then SOP came along and offered a more efficient method?
Right. SOP's gone now, but its ID protocol is still used all over. ID chips and dog tags, transponders required on all vehicles, aircraft, UGs, cyborgs, you name it.
But if everyone's using the same basic system, how do armies hide their info from the enemy?
Heavy-duty encryption, for one. The chips also use a hybrid cross-spectrum system to transmit the data. Without the proper key, it's hard to pick up the signal in the first place. PMCs typically only share their codes with nations or other PMCs they're working with.
What happens if they end up on different sides later, like in a separate conflict?
They just generate a new code and encryption key. The point is, EXIF is required on all combat units, but it's pretty easy to hide the signal.
And 99 times out of 100, unaffiliated means it's a hostile?
Right. Just like with IFF and aircraft. You're a quick study, Courtney.
Nice history lesson, Teach. Now, if you're done, I think you have a nation to save.
Just a little on-the-job training, Kev. Riding out.
What's up? No? Did you need anything else?
No, guess not. Just wanted to hear the sound of your voice.
Oh, save it for your wife, Raiden.
A most fascinating opponent, wouldn't you say?
What did you make of it, Doc?
Well, everything it said seems feasible enough. It's true all UGs feature high-level AI these days. Given enough time to adapt and learn, a neuro AI could certainly become able to comprehend speech. Then, with the right interface, speech and conversation will be possible.
But what about it having actual intelligence? John Searle disproved the viability of the Turing test back in 1980. In other words, just because something talks like a person doesn't mean it's really thinking. It could just be following some program designed to make it seem as intelligent as possible.
I'm impressed. You seem quite knowledgeable in this field.
I had a pretty memorable chat with an AI once, about 10 years ago. After that, I did a little reading.
Ah, yes, of course. The Patriot AI. I heard of this.
Was it actually intelligent, or just programmed to pretend? I'm still not sure.
I suppose it depends on how one defines intelligence. For example, many term chess-playing AIs and such as having sectional intelligence. Some in the field believe that sentience or self-consciousness is a necessary part of the definition. When you ask if this UG had intelligence, I suspect this is more your criteria?
Yeah, of course. Then you could ask, how do you define sentience exactly? And on and on and on.
Indeed. These terms can indicate a wide variety of meanings depending on